This is an extremely complicated concept, and I'm doing it in under 5 minutes. So before I jump into all the economic jargon, these are some key terms you'll need to know if any of this is going to make any sense at all. I recommend that if you think this is interesting, you should look it up in more detail because what you're about to hear is in very broad strokes. Pause the video now if you're unfamiliar with any of these things and read what they mean. So it's the early 2000s and big investors are looking for low-risk, high-reward investments. The housing market is looking really great. Housing prices were rising. Historically, people had been paying their mortgages for a long time, and the interest rates on these homes were triple and quadruple that of a treasury bond, which makes for a big return. Think of a mortgage as a loan the bank is giving to a house buyer. Financial institutions created these new types of investments called mortgage-backed securities to sell to investors. These were essentially bundles of loans repackaged as one new investment. MBSs were making oodles and oodles of money for the bank, but they were running out of mortgages to fill them with. To get around this problem, banks started giving out loans to people with bad credit and bundling these in with good mortgages and selling the whole MBS to an investor. The buyer thought the package was filled with all good mortgages, but usually there were some good and some horrible loans in the package. It's kind of like if you bought a box of strawberries that looked juicy and ripe, but only the ones on top were good and the ones underneath were all rotten. Companies called rating agencies were the one giving rotten strawberries AAA instead of the C it deserved. The problem here is that when banks started giving loans to people who couldn't pay, well, they didn't pay. They defaulted on their loans, and suddenly the bank owned a bunch of houses. This would have been fine if the housing bubble never popped, but most bubbles do, and so did this one. There were too many houses and not enough people who could afford them, so the prices plummeted and all that money disappeared. All the MBSs were now worth way less, and investors didn't know where their money went. Remember, mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations, aka even crappier package loans, and credit default swaps, which were people betting against the MBS, a la The Big Short, were completely new inventions. These are all things that some bankers pulled out of their butts one day to sell to people and make money. No one knew what their value was, and no one expected everything to collapse like it did. This web of transactions connected the whole economy, and as soon as one thing went wrong, suddenly financial institutions found themselves with investments on the book that were more or less worthless. Their money was disappearing, and some were forced into mergers, some were bought by other banks, and some had to declare bankruptcy. The economy was on the verge of total collapse. The government had to step in, or else we would have had another Great Depression. The Bush administration was packing up its bags, and the American people had just elected a cool new president. But at the end of 2008, the government created the Troubled Asset Relief Program. It loaned over $250 billion to banks and helped boost failing institutions. TARP was one of 4 important things the government did to stabilize the economy. To reestablish confidence in the market, government auditors performed stress tests on the bank's balance sheets. Remember those strawberries? They took a peek under the good ones and saw all the rotten ones and gave the box a new price. Then they told everyone about the new price. That's really important. Next, Obama took a page from FDR's book with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. He put people to work on government projects like roads and bridges as part of a stimulus package. Finally, the Dodd-Frank Act put in place laws that were designed to prevent this from happening again. Long story short, we made it out okay, but can we learn from the past?